Okay. Now, in addition to production following a bell-shaped curve, discovery also follows a bell-shaped curve, and it leads production because you can't produce until you discover. So actually, if you look at discoveries, they also follow a bell-shaped curve, and you can only produce as much as you discover. So as you get to the other side of the discovery curve, what's happening is your production is going to decline. You can only produce as much as is within the discovery envelope. And what has happened in the United States is that we reached the peak of discovery, and now we've reached the peak of production, and there is a continuing disparity between the amount of oil that the little bits of oil that we are finding and the amount that we are producing. The difference between the black curve and all the bars that I'm showing you looks something like this. Okay, so this is the increasing deficit of oil that we are seeing in the United States. We are basically pulling more and more oil out of the ground than we are discovering. We're discovering practically nothing at this point. And so the deficit continues to increase. Okay, now not everybody agrees with this view. The noted petroleum geologist and scientist Newt Gingrich was on CNN recently, on Larry King, I believe it was, and was pushing a program called Drill Here, Drill Now, Pay Less. I'm not sure where the drill here part was. He was in the CNN studios. I don't know whether that was in Atlanta or in New York City, neither of which would be particularly profitable to drill. But anyway, he wants to drill here, drill now, and pay less. But first, before you do anything, you have to go and buy the T-shirt. Okay, so that's his point of view, and unfortunately, many people have this point of view. One of the things that turns my stomach on television, many things turn my stomach. One of them are these investment bankers from Wall Street, most of whom no longer have jobs, wonderfully. But anyhow, the ones on Wall Street who get up on CNN and say, well, there's lots of oil. The companies, we just have to give financial incentives to the oil companies to go out there and find the oil, like they've been sitting on their hands for the last 40 years and haven't been looking for any of it. So not everybody agrees with the view I gave, but even if experts like Newt Gingrich are right, and there is more oil out there, there are a few realities that we need to think about. First of all, finding that oil isn't going to be easy or cheap, because most of the United States has been, well, all of the continental United States and most of Alaska has been thoroughly explored. So if there's any oil out there, it's going to be offshore, and it's going to be deep, and it's not going to be easy to find, and it's going to cost a lot of money to drill and get that oil, even if it's there. Second, there's another thing that needs to be taken into account. It's not likely we're going to find any big fields. This is a graph of what are called giants, or very large oil fields, and how much oil was found in these fields, or how much was found as a function of time. We are not finding any of these big fields, and this is more or less also a Hubbard curve. Okay? It's been over, what is that number? It's been over 25 years since we found a field with more than 10 billion barrels of oil in it. It's been over, 10 years that we found a field with over 5 billion barrels of oil in it. So there may be others lurking out there. Maybe off the coast of Brazil somewhere, there's a 10 billion barrel oil field. But that really isn't going to solve our problem long term, even if we found that field. Those fields, though, are pretty much gone. People in the oil industry are pretty smart, and they've looked in most of the places they're likely to find oil. And finally, and this gets to the drill here, drill now, pay less, even if we found a big field, simply the technological problems of bringing it online are going to delay that oil for at least 10 to 20 years. The North Slope of Alaska was discovered in 1968. And it took, 20 years to start bringing the oil in. It takes a long time. This bump, I believe, is actually for other resources in Alaska that people think that they can develop. And even if we found it today, it takes a while to bring these things online. So this is not the solution for the next year, for the next 5 years or so. Okay, let's just take a quick look at the numbers and assume that I'm right and Newt Gingrich is wrong. And that is total U.S. oil reserves at the moment are about 20.9 billion barrels. And I would say that's all there is. There ain't no more. Okay? How much oil do we use? Okay, total U.S. daily consumption. I have 2005 figures. They're all about the same. 21.7 million barrels a day, of which we import 11.7 billion barrels a day. I was around in 1971 when we were going to become energy independent by 1990, but I don't know whatever happened to that. Okay, so my question to you is, you know, get out your calculators, get out your computers, or get out the napkins, the paper ones, not the cloth ones.
That's how real they are.
Okay, this is how we, this is something our students can't do, unfortunately. I want you to do a back-of-the-envelope calculation of how much, or back-of-the-napkin calculation of how much oil we have left. Okay? And for those of you who are young and challenged by this kind of thing, I'll walk you through it. 20.7 million barrels a day, 11.7 million barrels a day imported. I think you can do the math, and you come up with, where did this go? There we go. Okay, 9 million barrels a day we use in the United States. Okay, that's consistent with Shell's estimate, 2 times 5 times 2 million barrel a day tankers a day. So 10 million barrels a day. I don't need the details. I'm doing this to 1 decimal place. No decimal places even. Okay? Now, so how much do we use in a year? All right? Well, that's 9 times 365, 9 times 5, and blah. No. 9 is close to 10. 365 is close to 300. One number's a little higher, one number's a little lower. So 10 times 10 million barrels a day times 300 days in a year. I'll give you 2 weeks off for vacation. That gives you roughly 3 billion barrels a year. Okay? So how much time do we have left? 20.9 billion barrels total, 3 billion barrels a day, 29.9 rounded off to 21. 21 divided by 3 is 7. Okay? 7, this is 2008. So 2015, give or minus 2 years. It doesn't really matter. That's crunch time, all right? That's about how much oil we have left. Domestic oil. Domestic production, okay? Well, what's going to happen? I mean, I do this calculation. People say, well, are we going to run out? Yeah, this isn't like one day we're going to be producing, and the next day it's all gone, okay? We're not going to drop off a cliff. What will happen is what we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years, namely, a constant rise in the price of oil, especially in the price of domestic oil. Okay, and that will go along. As domestic oil gets scarcer and becomes more expensive, the price will go up. And eventually we'll get to the point where, for example, we're paying $152 to fill our 17-gallon gas tank in our SUVs instead of the current $68 that we're paying. And at that point, people's behavior might begin to change. Unfortunately, I think this is the only way that people's behavior is going to change. As the price goes up, people's behavior will change, and in the economics of other technologies will also become more economic. So people's behavior will change as the price goes up, so we're not going to go off a cliff, but as it gets more expensive, that's when things will begin to change. Of course, one option would be to move to Saudi Arabia or even Venezuela, the workers' paradise. Until that happens, what we can do, the only choice is to continue to increase our imports of oil. Well, there's lots of oil out there. We're the world's superpower. We'll just go out and, buy up all that oil and use it. Well, there's a couple of problems. Okay? First of all, we're not alone. Second of all, the Hubbard curve, the peak oil applies anywhere you go. And so many countries that used to produce oil, well, they still produce some oil, but they've already reached their peak oil also. And when you add up all of their bell-shaped curves, you get a global bell-shaped curve, and most of you are familiar with this, that looks something like this. And here is one version of global hydrocarbon production under one scenario. And as, again, most people in this audience know, we are somewhere near the peak of that curve. And this particular estimate, the peak comes out at, what did I say, come out at 2010. And total production at that point is around 32 million billion barrels a day. Billion barrels a year. I've got it in years there. Okay. So let's look at that number very quickly. Again, a back-of-the-envelope calculation. What is total daily production if it's 32 billion barrels a year? Well, let's be generous. Let's round it up to 35 billion barrels per year. Again, I don't care about the decimal points here. All right? So that's per year, 365 days a year. We'll divide one by the other. Again, let's use 350 days per year. And what we come out with is more or less 100 million barrels per day as maximum global oil production. Now, it might be 85, it might be 93, it might be 100, it might be 110. I don't really care. It's on the order of 100 million barrels a day. That's all there is. That's all there is. After that, it's going to decline. And it all comes out at about somewhere in that 2010-2015 time range. So again, it's crunch time.